Good morning, I'm Chris Fox, and today we're talking about the catalyst creation rules for the Magitech Chronicles, which are one of the most important systems that you as a game master will need to understand. This is how you quickly and easily create adventures that are very tailored to your setting. So what you see here is, directly taken from the Magitech Chronicles, and obviously we've got space involved. But if you wanted to run a pure fantasy campaign using the Magitech Chronicles, that's supported, and you can create catalysts on any planet that you want, any area that you want. So we lead off with a bit of fiction, which you can read at your own leisure. But then we jump into the 7 questions, and these are the parts that I want you to understand. So when you are designing a catalyst, all you really have to do is come up with the answers to these 7 questions, and by the end of that, you're done. So if you have a single piece of paper or a tablet or an open document or whatever, and you answer these, by the time you're finished, you have enough material to run a full adventure that's probably going to entertain your party for at least an evening, possibly longer, depending on how large what you're creating is. So we're going to go over each of these 7 questions in turn. It begins with what aspect or aspects did your deity represent? So there are 8 aspects of magic. Typically, you're going to choose one of those. Maybe use a giant fire elemental. Maybe she was a nature goddess, and so she represents life. You get to choose. And once you've made that choice, it's going to really ripple outwards and affect a lot of the other questions, because the types of powers and primals that your catalyst attracts are going to reflect the initial choice that you make. It is possible that you can do a dual catalyst. So let's say you've got that nature goddess in question. Maybe she has both air and life, in which case players would get to choose when they went to that catalyst. This is very, very rare. Not too many of those exist. Typically what would happen in that situation is our nature goddess would break into a life catalyst and a separate air catalyst. And that's usually what you find throughout the sector. Next question we want to ask is, how powerful was this deity? We're assigning something called a divinity rating on a scale of 1 to 100 to represent their overall power. And this is not a linear scale. It's more logarithmic in that it's exponential. So a rating 10 is much, much stronger than 10 rating 1s, as an example. And you can see our scale here. I'm not going to read out every part of it, obviously, but it caps at what I call a false titan at the 100 rating. They believe themselves to be titans, but they are not the true primal titans that were originally created. Those would be closer to probably 1,000 on this scale. But they're the largest surviving gods left, the false titans. Anyway, the divinity score that you determine is going to really represent how powerful this catalyst is, which is going to determine how powerful the guardian is and what type of primals it has. So it's going to set the tone for it. So if you're not sure what to put for a value initially, read the rest of the questions and you should be able to puzzle it out. And what we'll do is we'll create a bunch of examples. So all of the main catalysts that are used in the book series are going to be represented, and you'll get to see sort of where they all fall. Next question to ask is, how did this god or goddess die? How did your deity, meet their end? Was it a great cosmic battle? Was it a self-sacrifice? How did they die? Because that's going to really determine what part of the body this is. Is it the entire god? Is it, just some part of it, like an arm that was chopped off of a titan? You get to decide what that catalyst looks like. In fact, in some cases, maybe the god itself is still alive, but some part of their body was chopped off, and this is the part of the body that has been left behind. And that brings us to magical materials. Now, the core of our magic creation system is magical materials. When you are designing an Elder Magus, you need lots of different materials, a minimum of 2, a maximum equal to your magic. And so usually what you'll see is between 4 and 5 magical materials used. Well, this is where people get them. So as an example, Zal, which is what you saw all the way up the top here, this is the skull of Zal. What floats around Zal are something I call void stones. And void stones can be used as mana batteries or set directly into magical items to hold void spells. So they're very useful. What's even more useful, but harder to get, is entropic bone. Entropic bone can be found in the skull itself. So you can mine that bone and take it and use it in your own creations. And it's very dense, which means that it adds an extra point of armor to anything constructed with it. Some magical materials have something cool like that. So for example, feather steel will make things lighter. Entropic bone will make them tougher. Not all materials will grant something like that, but you as the GM get to sort of decide what these materials are and what bonuses they give. And this should reflect the overall power level of the catalyst. So the stronger the god, the more materials you should make. And then the next question, does the catalyst have a guardian or is it wild? A wild catalyst simply means there's nobody protecting it. And usually what happens in those cases is there's several tribes of primals that are warring on each other and there's no clear winner. If you're reading along with some of the novels, the novel Hatchling, you're going to see exactly that, where you've got multiple groups that are fighting each other of primals because there's no really in charge. If you do choose to assign a guardian, that guardian comes from one of the primal races, and is ultimately going to seize control of that catalyst and do everything in their power to protect it. And their power level is going to scale based on the strength of the catalyst. So a rating 1 Guardian might be something weak like an Earth-scale Drake, whereas a rating 10 might be an Elder Worm. And if you find a rating 25 catalyst, that's probably got a full-on god protecting it. You want to determine the dominant primal types, and it doesn't mean that you have to pick more than one. You can choose just one if you'd like. I typically tend to do like 3 or 4, and what I'll do is figure out, okay, maybe one type of primal morphs into another type over time. So maybe you're doing a nature catalyst and you have a bunch of races of giants, where you've got, storm giants and ogres and all sorts of different giants and hill giants, whatever you can think of are there, and they're the different types of primals. You really have a lot of latitude here. You can see the examples that we've used and through the fiction sort of get a better understanding of what races have been explored. But anything you can think of will work. So if you want a more traditional D&D style campaign, you can choose races that reflect that. These primal types are simply the preferences that the god had in life. And since you're determining what those are, it's really easy for you to pick anything that you'd like to tailor to your adventure. And then finally, the last part, which is the part that players are always most interested in, what powers does your catalyst grant? So a typical catalyst is always going to offer magic of its aspect or aspects, the attribute associated with its aspect or aspects, and then finally greater magic of that aspect. So in other words, if somebody already has fire magic and they come to a fire catalyst, they can get 3 more pool and 3 more resistance by getting greater fire magic, and that stacks infinitely. They could go to 92 fire catalysts and just keep getting resistance and more pool. And then lastly, the most important part anyway, catalysts always have a defining ability. This is an ability that they grant that no other catalyst is likely to give. Whatever else you think that a catalyst should grant, as a GM, I would encourage you to make these liberal and fun for your players. And so if you think it should give something else, it should give them wings, it should make their eyes turn red, whatever you think is appropriate, add that in and make it more fun and try and flesh out your catalyst. But as far as what the abilities actually are, you can see here I've got some examples. So to contrast, because at higher ratings of a catalyst, the same defining ability is likely to be stronger. So if we went to a rating 1, we might get something like Edge on all stealth and larceny checks. If we're at a rating 10, we might remove all penalties from their checks. So it's the same 1 power that I'm getting. I'm just getting this add-on because it's a stronger catalyst. And then the rating 25 might allow an auto success where you don't even have to roll. You just succeed at whatever you're trying to steal. And then finally, a rating 50 would essentially turn you into kind of a minor god where you can't be seen ever unless you want to. And all attempts to scry you, no matter how powerful the person scry, just fail. That's an example of how this sort of scales depending on the strength of the catalyst. But you want to give something that's unique that they can't get in some other way, because that's the real excitement of catalysts. Anyway, guys, that is a quick look at the catalyst creation rules. Hopefully these are useful. If you have questions, please post those in the comments, and I will keep these videos coming.